The trouble is when church leaders interpret the Bible wrongly or misinterpret it, and then they, I would say, get a hold on somebody like me because they thought I needed to be saved. In their interpretation of what being saved is, to not care about this life but to go to heaven, was what they told me, and I believed them at the time, was that they then feel responsible for you in the interpretation that they're applying over you. But when you misinterpret the Bible, it's very serious because you start applying it to people closest to you. So if you go to a church, you'll become the target of the church leaders' interpretation. And they just leave ordinary people who travel around cities on buses and go to pubs and bars and meet their friends and go out to socialize together as being responsible adults who've got their own children and families who believe in the Ten Commandments, and they leave them alone because they're satisfied that that's all that they trust them, and they think they're responsible adults, and they don't even try to apply the way they interpret the Bible over people that they secretly respect. And yet, by their interpretation, they tell the church people that those people are going to hell for not believing. But they don't actually believe that. They highly respect these worldly people, but they don't tell you that in the church. And so the church becomes a hospital for God, because they end up taking people that they think want to use the Bible as a crutch because they can't manage in their life. And that's what they thought about me. And then they start treating you like you're in a hospital bed for the rest of your life to do with the Bible. And they misinterpret the Bible and they trivialize sin. And the worst sin ever is murder. But it's not a far off extrapolation to treat somebody like they're in a hospital bed all their life and not want them to get married, not trust them, not believe in them, not believe they've got moral stability or soundness, just to think they've come to the church because they need a crutch. And that's the next step down from murder. So it's actually a sin. It's just as much a sin as Cain killing Abel. And Cain was judged by the Bible for killing Abel. The reason he wasn't judged is because the Bible's trying to see what your reaction is to how the events transpired. But the Bible's a book for learning and teaching, not for role-playing. So what happened to Cain is not a role example of what God's will is if you would be a real person in a real world in that situation. But the Ten Commandments that's for real people in the real world. And that also applied to Cain and Abel. And the reason for the flood was that the sin of indifference spread to the people after Cain murdered Abel, and they didn't care about Abel and they didn't punish Cain. And the next generation got blasé about it, like people do now on the news when they hear about bad things happening every day. They just get used to it. And that's destroying the sanctity and the sacredness of life. Because if you consider Jesus' death and you go to, say, a Roman Catholic church, it's very, very holy and sacred and sanctified and a sanctity. But the same thing is about if somebody loses their life in real life or is murdered. It doesn't happen very often. And people are talking about it all the time on the news, just talking about it. And that makes the same situation as what happened after Cain killed Abel, which was the interim period leading to the flood. And the sin was the way people's hearts had become dark, and they didn't care, and they just got used to it. And you shouldn't get used to it. It was a sin that was committed, and Jesus remembered that sin because he compared his death with the death of Abel in Hebrews 12:24. And so people shouldn't be talking about murder and death and theft and bad things happening every day on the news, because it just makes people indifferent to it, and they just get used to it. And it's supposed to really affect us and really upset us and make us feel we've got guilt and we've got a problem and we're partly responsible for that. And it's a sin to talk about it all the time. And they talked about Cain and Abel for years, and it was leading to people feeling unjust about what God feels very caring and careful about how it's appropriated to people. And Cain felt strongly about it. Sorry, not Cain. Noah felt strongly about it because he cursed Ham, his son, for Canaan after the flood. And that was showing that Noah was exasperated that the sin of Cain and Abel was still carrying on even after the flood. And that's why Noah got drunk. But they shouldn't be talking about it all the time. And the church doesn't interpret the Bible like I'm saying now. And so when you join the church, they think believing in Jesus is just because this life isn't important and you can be a martyr and you can die and go to heaven. So they don't want you to get married. They don't want you to have a good job. They don't want you to be responsible. They think you're not morally stable and not sound. And they treat you with less respect than they treat people who go to Wetherspoon's pub with families and children who believe in the 10 Commandments. And yet in the church, they say those people are going to hell. But they actually highly respect those people and think that they're married and they're responsible and they've got children because they trust them. And if you join the church because they interpret the Bible wrongly, not how I'm interpreting it on this video, they don't trust you, and they treat your whole life like you're a walking dead man walking, that you don't exist. You're just breathing, and you don't have any right to be a proper man or have a proper life. And they don't trust me, and they don't believe in me, and they think there's something wrong with me. And if I'd never gone to church, I would be treated as a normal man and have lots of mates and friends and maybe a wife and children by now. But by getting involved with the Bible where they interpret it wrongly and going to a church, it's ruined my life.